Our next speaker I will bring to the stage is Dr. Ruchi Patak, and she's going to talk to us from a surgeon's perspective about some of these 3D printing technologies that we've been talking about. So I will bring her to the stage. Hello, Dr. Ruchi.
Hi, Melanie.
I will give you the floor.
Yeah, so can I just share my presentation before that? Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see it. Yes, I can see it. We can see your entire screen, so if you can pull up your specific presentation, we should see it.
So, is my presentation seen now?
Yes, we can see it. And if you can put it in presentation mode, we'll be able to see it better.
Okay. Is that something you can see now?
That looks great. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much, Melanie. And today I'm here to speak on a surgeon's perspective. The last talk was by Katie, and she actually demonstrated wonderful cases, which actually showed that what can be done with 3D printing technology. But I would like to demystify the role of a surgeon for 3D technology translation and penetration. But before that, let me take this opportunity to thank Nora and the team and all the volunteers who've been working tirelessly to demonstrate this show. And it has been amazing through the last 48 hours. And so thank you for that. And I also thank all the people who are here to listen to us. So taking this to the next level, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm coming from India, and I'm coming from this center, which is called All India Institute of Medical Sciences, which is the premier institute of India. This is the biggest trauma center with the highest footfall of around 70,000 patients per year. That is all the trauma patients that we have. So we basically work in 4 limbs, which is the pre-hospital care, the hospital care, the treatment, and the rehabilitation, where I work on the rehabilitation portion, which corresponds to reconstruction. With such a high level of footfall, what we've seen is that when the patients come in, we have to treat them by a particular protocol wherein we need to first save their lives. So which is called an advanced trauma life support driven protocol, which says, treat the greatest threat to life first. So therefore, we have to look at life first, and then you have to come over to reconstruction. Because of this, what happens is that the cases like reconstruction cases and cases wherein you need to rehabilitate a patient, they all take a back seat. And as a result, what happens is that all of these cases come to us on the OPD basis. And with such a high footfall, we really have a plethora of cases coming in. Now, let me take you a little back in 2011, which was the first time that I entered the emergency department. And let me tell you that it was 11 p.m., 11 o'clock in the night, and there was this patient which came up, and the first day of my duty as a trainee, and what we see is that the face is completely shattered. We could not see anything on the face, only blood, and there was injury in the abdomen, there was injury, there was some splenic injury, and there was a lot of threat to life. So the patient was managed by the emergency department, where I was a part of it. But then soon, within 20 minutes, he had to be taken to the operation theater and had to be managed for splenic injuries, for intestinal injuries, and other aspects. And therefore, the face took a back seat. But we were asked to actually only not reconstruct, but only fix the mandible so that he could breathe. And then we fixed only the mandible for that time. And once he was kind of stabilized, we were not allowed to do any reconstruction at that moment. And so that was how it happened, that for a month, this patient stayed he was there in the hospital. And what happens is that in a month's time now, this entire problem that he has on the face becomes secondary. Now this patient is asked to go home, but not asked to be operated because, as I said, Now let me take a story a little forward. We at the Trauma Center in the Department of Trauma Surgery operate in groups of 4 to 5 surgeons of different specialties, which includes plastic surgeons, trauma surgeons, and then we also have in our team a surgeon from trauma surgery background, proper general surgeon, and then we also have the JRs, SRs, and everybody working in a team. So as we go ahead, let me tell you, by the time it was 2015, it was almost 3 years, 4 years ahead, and I had taken an off from the team back in 2015. I reconstruction using fat, which is abdominal fat for facial grafting. And you will not believe me, but then in a week's time, what I see is this patient, and this is the same patient Thursday at the trauma center. And this was the patient who's with his brother, his mother, and so we kind of knew him well about that. But after a period of 4 years, I still see the same patient. And so we had a one-to-one chat with the patient. And what we realized with that is that he was having a big problem. And he tells me that it has been 3 to 4 years. He's been roaming around, sometimes to the maxillofacial surgery, sometimes to the ophthalmology, sometimes to the ENT, the plastic surgery. But his major problem was that since the past 3 years, he could not eat food. He could not eat he could not bite, he could not chew. Forget about speaking, because he had a big hole in his palate. He could not speak well. And one of the eye had been damaged, but the damaged eye was still there. So he could not see from one of the eye. There were so many problems. There was this lacrimal gland which was damaged, and so there was infected gland there, which was ejecting out a lot of infected pus all the time. And the patient was like in real bad state. And when I had this conversation with this patient, I still cannot forget. It was really painful. I actually look back to my life. In those 3 to 4 years, I had learned a lot. In those 3 to 4 years, I had a baby. My daughter had grown to be 4 years. She had joined school. I started to correlate that we had moved ahead so much in life. But those 4 years, this guy, poor guy, he was still coming to the OPD for different treatments. So that was so after this, the story completely changed. I didn't know how to help him. There was one person in our department while we were just discussing this patient who actually suggested that why not try 3D printing? Now, this is end of 2014, beginning of 2015, when he told me, like, let's look at 3D printing. And we kind of Googled 3D printing. While at that point in India, 3D printing was not there, present. We didn't know at least any service provider, nobody there. So we came to know that in the southern part of India, there was somebody who was making models. And so we kind of found out their number and asked the patient if he could pay. So because the patient was a mechanical engineering patient, and so he had that amount of money that he could pay. So he shelled out $2,500 and he got this model made. He got it in a month's time. And you will not believe it, but when I saw this model for the first time, now it has been a long time, but I still remember vividly that when I saw it for the first time, I was taken aback. Because I could so clearly see the pieces of bones and how they were aligned, because no surgeon, nobody was ready to take up this case for surgery. The only reason being because it was a confusion as to how the elements are aligned in a three-dimensional space. And as Katie said, different views of the anatomy can be visualized. And that was the thing that happened right here. We could actually see it both ways, inside and outside. And if you look at the model very clearly, look at this, how beautiful. I could see every aspect. This was like a jigsaw puzzle. I just needed to join it. And I was so sure what to do next. So I immediately convinced the department, and we created another OT for him. And we took him for surgery. In a week's time, this patient was convinced for surgery, and his first surgery took place. And look at the palate. We could see that there was no bone, absolutely no bone on one side of the palate. We did see a lot of stuff on the two-dimensional CT, but this was not what we saw in the CT. This was like mind-blowing, because we could see all the elements separately. And so I would say that's yes. What is 3D printing? For me, 3D printing is a promising clinical tool with enormous potential. By promising, I mean I could visualize the treatment outcomes, and I think that is what makes it promising. Because I could visualize it was the reason that we could actually operate on it. So this was the case. I thought everything went on fine and I helped the patient and I was okay, everything went. After 3 years, this patient comes in again to the department. This patient had gone then after us. He had gone to the plastic surgery department where he got his maxilla made, his upper jaw made using fibula, which is a bone on the feet. And what happens is that his fibula got infected because of the fistula that he had on his palate. And if you can look on the second picture, there is this necrosed fibula which is there. And immediately within 3 days, I had to remove this fibula out. And so actually speaking, the free fibula failed for this patient. And this was really bad because fibula is probably the last surgery that one patient can expect. I mean, after this, you usually give teeth either or implants or whatsoever. But for him, this surgery failed. So probably very less hope next. Now he's asking me what to do. So there were lots of challenges I faced while I did this patient. And one of them was cost. Why I wanted to tell the story was that this was one patient which was constantly there from the day I started looking into 3D printing till date. And so I shared a little chunk of story with this patient. But in general, we did more patients. And so let me tell you, the challenges that we face as surgeons, the first one comes at a cost. 6.7% of the population of my country lives below the poverty line. So that is $1.25 a day. So in a country where so many people are at such levels, and we work in a hospital, which is a government hospital, where you have 70 to 80% of the population with this kind of a strata. Now, how do we counter that cost? That is a very big challenge that we face. Next is the trained manpower. So that is another problem which is cropping up. But yes, we do have engineering colleagues through which we do get help. Then comes the learning curve, because the burden of patients is so high that the learning curve to take out the time to learn, that becomes a little difficult. And I think the pandemic really helped a lot in those terms. And the last is the regulatory requirements, which I thought was our problem. But after having talked to a lot of surgeons across the world, I realized it's a global thing and everybody has challenges with regulatory requirements which are needed to be met. I did my training and then I took up research on medical 3D printing with titanium patient-specific implants. So that was our step forward after modeling. Till modeling, I was still in my residency phase. But after that, I had to take a dedicated time out for 3D printing. So I took up PhD on 3D printing, which was on patient-specific implants for mid-face region. And this is one of the patients, again, the same patient whom we took it further. So after this, the patient did not pay the cost of whatsoever the treatment was, because we kind of raised funds and figured out ways to actually create that amount for him. So this is just an example to show you that how we went ahead with 3D printing and how we placed another implant with personalized surgical planning. So as I heard in the last lecture by Katie, that complexity is in the instrumentation and geometry, not in the implant. And that is the reason I just pulled out this slide at the last moment to keep it here in the presentation to show you that this case, if I had to operate it with my conventional surgical plan, it would have taken me at least 3 to 4 hours, because I would have taken iliac crest graft and then harvesting the graft and then placing it. It would have taken that time. But let me tell you, it took me barely 45 minutes right from the time we gave the incision to the closure. And so once you have the implant and once you place the implant, it's like so easy, and you'll really feel that, you can do it. But of course, the regulatories are there. And then after I completed my research came the pandemic. And the pandemic was amazing in its own way, because there were other problems associated with the pandemic. The supply chains had frozen. 3D printing was less known till then. And by the time pandemic came, 3D printing came right across to people. There were services which were needed by people, which required minimum contact, minimum appointments, which all were possible through 3D printing. There was a time to learn for people. And so all the surgeons, all the doctors, and online courses available. So there was a change in the conversation which was happening, and this was good. So where is the industry going? Well, Voller's report in 2020 said that medical applications from 1.65 billion in 2019 will projected to be reached at 2.2 billion by 2024, which is huge. So we can say that technology has come a long way. But I have two questions to ask you. How many surgeons are using technology? And how many surgeons are using it to its full potential? Because the number is going to decrease. And by full potential, I mean that this technology, if it is available right in the hands of the surgeon in terms of being available at point of care, what I mean to say will actually help the surgeon to use it to its full potential, because then you can figure out ways to do different things. So, what is the role of a doctor? Well, I believe that a surgeon or a doctor or a medical professional is a flag bearer of the technology for delivering outstanding care to the patient. Well, I feel a flag bearer because it is the patient who has the identification of the right case where the technology can be used. It is the surgeon who has to understand and create a workflow in the team as to how this technology has to be delivered. He is the person who's right in contact with the patient, and the patient has to trust him to the most out of the whole team. And so it is the surgeon who can take this technology further for translation, for penetration. And so during the pandemic, I thought, let me see what is happening in the world with 3D printing. And so I started with a podcast, which is called Surgeons and 3D Printing. And I interviewed surgeons across the globe to know what is happening in the 3D printing world. I'd like to share a video because I want some of the flag bearers and their messages to reach you. And so please listen to the video.
And I've been to a lot of countries trying to teach people how to do this. And really, if you want to impact patients, if you want better outcomes, this technology has a lot to offer. Not just because it's the technology, it's truly meaningfully impacting patient care, or else we wouldn't be doing it here.
Exactly.
And if you want to do that, wherever part of the globe you are, you'll see dramatic differences in the outcomes. And it's been proven in every country I've seen it implemented. So I would just encourage your listeners to just start. Don't think of all the barriers. Think about, I need a software, a printer, a local champion, and some quality control metrics, and I should start because I can be the one to change care where I am.
Disciplines that are late bloomers, even if we are here, but there is always there's a case that is the first case that they think, oh, we'll do a model, we'll go to Solomon, and then I'm happy. No matter when they come, I'm happy. And one good first case will prove the point, and then they will stay with us.
Yes, as an interventional cardiologist, when I go into the cath lab for a complex heart procedure, I'm just looking at a flat panel angiographic screen while I'm twiddling catheters inside the veins and the arteries.
Exactly.
And
it's a whole new thing.
Just dependent upon my spatial understandings. But when I'm going into the case after having actually handled the 3D model, my fingers work automatically because I know exactly how the anatomy is, exactly how I need to manipulate my hardware in order to get there. So it makes life so much simpler for us. Understanding patient pathology, communicating between ourselves, and finally operating or doing an intervention.
Exciting to have a technology to hold the anatomy of your patient in your hands without touching the patient. That was really exciting. And to be able to plan surgical procedures before you go in the operating theater, to pre-bend titanium plates to the exact shape of the anatomy of your patients, and even to be able to produce patient-specific implants. That was always very exciting and interesting for us. But I think I would like to encourage everyone who's interested in this technology to start with it. It's sometimes it seems to be complicated at the very beginning, but nowadays, you know, when we started, there was not much documentation and help available. But nowadays, you have so many YouTube videos, documentation, software available. So you can start more or less with a very, very small investment, and the results can be very, let's say, interesting and exciting. And as soon as a surgeon, for example, when you start with 3D printing, you will learn easily how this technology can help you in the daily business. That's for me also the driver for all, let's say, developments and innovation we would like to work on in the future as well, that we clearly see the benefits. There's no area of research where you can easily translate or implement the results of your work easily in your clinical workflows. So therefore, I think computer-based planning and medical 3D printing is a very thankful area where you have a quick success with a rather small effort. Thanks.
Earlier, you know, when laparoscopy came in the picture, it started with simulation only, and nowadays, you know, people, they first go to the simulation lab, they learn laparoscopy there, and then they come out on the live patient. So for our country, wherein we have millions of population, so to train each and every person on the same thing would not be possible. So you need to have more and more of such type of labs wherein students can come, they can get themselves trained, they can learn the nitty-gritties of doing the modeling themselves. And then definitely in coming 5 to 10 years, yes, like nobody had imagined that laparoscopy would reach to the rural areas also. So similarly, this can also be percolated down to the very ground level in coming 5 to 6 years. Right.
So what I wanted to show is that surgeons across specialties are actually ready to embrace the technology, but there are very few of them, and we need many more. And so I have a message for the surgeons that I don't know how many lives you can still impact with technology, but at least start with one. Because technology is an enabler, so let's use it to do our bit. And I would like to say to the industry that collaboration is the key. Because let's close the gap in 3D technology translation and penetration for patient benefit. Because the real innovation is in making this technology available to the last person sitting in the row. And that is the patients. Thank you.
So much, Doctor. That was, again, an amazing presentation, and especially love the video. So thank you so much for connecting all these people together to make that video. There are a couple questions in the chat, and I'll let the audience know we do have a few more minutes. So if anyone has questions, please feel free to post in the Q&A tab. One of the questions is the video available that you showed in your presentation somewhere online? Okay.
Yes.
If you can now or right after the presentation, will you post it in the chat, a link to the video? Okay, great. That'd be awesome. Another question from the audience is, which CAD is your go-to software?
Which software is the go-to software? Okay, so when we started, we actually started with open softwares because, you know, the cost was a constraint. But then what I feel is because we work in an institution, and in an institution, we were able to procure mimics, materialize mimics. And so for us, materialize, you know, we could start there because we had our engineering colleagues which had the software there, and we could work in collaboration with them. But I would say don't stop the software, stop your growth or your learning, because it's very important, because these are things which will come to your mind and you will not learn because you will not find ways. So, yeah.
Thank you. There was a comment thanking you for creating the podcast. It's a designer that works with surgeons, so she has been enjoying it.
Thank you very much.
There are some other people that are looking for your contact information. So perhaps when you post that video, if you could also post some of your contact information I think it went by a little too fast in the presentation. They weren't quite able to get that.
I'll do that.
Yeah. And then another question is, how should engineers and surgeons work closer together?
Wow, a great question. And that's the need of the hour, I feel, because that has to be done. I cannot learn everything, and so can the engineer. Both of us have to actually, have their own skills and have their own expertise. But there is a certain element where you cannot replace a doctor, and there is a certain element where we cannot replace an engineer. And that is the point where we need to glide together. So I think one has to approach the doctors who are actually doing such surgeries, or even if they are in institutes, and actually offer their help. And then, because every surgeon has a different way to work. Every surgeon has different formats in which they work. Even so as to say, different kind of case selection might also change. Each surgeon might take a decision in a different way. So you definitely have to choose a surgeon, associate with the surgeon for some amount of time to see what is the kind of feedback. Some surgeons are very active. They need it very fast, in a click of some are like little patients. Some are working in a place. Suppose I'm working in a trauma center. I need something in 24 hours. So I need it in 24 hours. While in some places, you can plan the case and you can deliver it in like 2 days, maybe 3 days. So all of those considerations are to be taken care of.
I think we have time for one more question. So this question is related to biomaterials. It's specific to biomaterials for the mandible. This person is saying they are soon to become available to the market, such as hyperelastic bone. Do you have any thoughts on the application of these materials?
Wow. So once you have the material about it, because I am not a material scientist, definitely. So whatever material is there available, I use that. But I would want to know about your material, frankly speaking. I would like to know the qualities of your material, the properties of your material, to see how it works. And I think that is, that's what I would say. And if there is no question, can I tell you something?
Please.
Yeah. So this virtual world actually opened up so many things. We tried to create models. I had to give a conference where I had to actually speak on, I had to teach the surgeons how to stop nasal bleeding. And so I had no resources at that time, because this conference came up like in the middle of nothing. And so we created this model. I painted it with this clay. And then I took this catheter, I put it right inside, showing how we can stop nasal bleeding. And when it went inside, I could show the surgeon that how it goes here at this point where the bleeding has to be stopped, and then how you push in the syringe, which has only air, and there is a balloon which inflates out there, if you can see here, and it stops the bleeding. So when you push it forward, the balloon is there and the bleeding is stopped. And so because of this model, the teaching became so easy. I was so happy that I could do that. And these are things we can consider. Yeah.
Great. And there was actually one more question posted in chat, which is great based on what you just said. And it is, how about creating some engineering, medical courses or projects at universities that outline how to collaborate?
Oh, I'm open to that. Please get in touch. I'm completely open to that. Yes.
Okay. That's great. Thank you so much, Dr. Ruchi. It was a true pleasure having you, and a very different perspective. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Women in 3D Printing. Thank you, Nora. Thank you very much.